We used to own a racetrack in Ohio years ago, but we lived in southeast PA. You had to take the turnpike to get there in any reasonable amount of time, and one of the times my mother, my sister, and I were together to go meet my stepdad, who was driving separately with a trailer to haul equipment. We got off at an exit after paying a toll and go off into a strip mall with a bunch of rinky-dink-looking buildings. Not dirty, just faded pastel colors. Didn't even look like there was a town nearby. They had a diner, though, and we hadn't eaten since we left, 4 hours before, so we stopped in. The food sucked and was completely tasteless. People stared at us the whole time. It wasn't dark like a cave, just not a ton of windows. There were some, enough for ambient light. Like a Denny's if the power went out, that sort of thing. And an unreasonable number of people we noticed had bandages on them. The only person who said a word to us was the girl who took our order, who also rang us up at the end. We decided not eating was better than going back there, so we wrote down the exit in a little journal we'd been keeping in the glove compartment, so we knew not to make that mistake again. A couple hours later, we get to the track, and my stepdad asks how everything went. We said it was uneventful, but told him we'd recorded a real whopper for the journal and not to take the exit we'd marked because it was Shitsville. He gets really excited, and we're all kind of wondering why. He's actually said the words before, "I hate eating. It takes too much time and gets in the way of me living my life." So our less than stellar review definitely wasn't a motivating factor. He tells us he thinks we ate ghost food and that the people in the diner were vampires. He wouldn't stop talking about it for like 10 minutes, and it was making my sister uncomfortable, so my mom did an about-face and tried logicking him away from it. We argued that the food had no reason to suck. They could have easily killed us, and nobody could recall ever seeing the A movie where the wound, left by whatever bit the person to make them vampires in the first place, still existed on their body. He got less excited and left it alone. We have the race weekend. It's time to drive all the way back. He asks me if I want to come with him, since he had to drive alone the way there. I say sure. 2 hours in, he pulls off. I think it's weird because we had a gigantic fucking breakfast before we left, and I know he's anti-eating. I didn't recognize it at first, coming from the other direction, but eventually it occurs to me he's going to the diner's exit. He wants to see it for himself. He stops to pay the toll, doesn't mention our story. He asks if there's a diner at the exit to make sure he has the right one. You can't see it from the ramp. The guy says there was one, but it burned down. Holy shit. Okay, so there weren't vampires, but what a fucking coincidence. We just eat there, and then right after, in the span of 2.5 days, they have a freak accident. This almost intrigues him more than the supernatural bit, and I am 100% on board for checking it out. We drive over, same humdrum bullshit strip mall, except where we went to eat, it's just this charred mess. Not like with holes in it. It wasn't a wooden frame in pieces like a cartoon. You just could seriously tell there was damage. No vehicles, no tape. I'd assume they'd at least test it for being a crime. And they'd clean the area around it well. We go to get back on the turnpike, and these poor toll guys are stuck in a booth hardly bigger than they are, so it's the same dude getting back on. Hard to explain, but it's a short ramp, straight road perpendicular to the turnpike. Guy's booth, lots of straight. Then you can turn into the strip so you see him again, and then fork back. Anyway, my stepdad's like, "I thought you said there was a diner there." Guy says there was, like I told you, burned down. He asked if they'd figured out yet what caused it. Was it a grease fire or what? That kind of thing. The guy says, "Yet?" "Yeah, it had to have been in the last 2 or 3 days. They didn't investigate it. It wasn't on the news." Then the guy says, "Oh, we know what happened. It was on the news when it happened 8 years ago." It sounds ridiculous and cliché, and there are tons of stories like it. I know what I saw. It was the same exit, the same distance from the road, same building save for the one. I don't expect anyone to ever believe me, which is why I don't usually share it. Plus, there's no way to prove it because I moved to Florida by the time I was old enough to drive, and I don't have the exit number anymore. It was after Somerset, which I remember because of 9/11, and before Wheeling. but that's almost an hour-long difference, so even that's no help. All that I really think happened is that the place burned down like a motherfucker while we were gone, and that guy's just an asshole. I don't think it burned down in the past, and I don't think that I ate ghost food. But my stomach dropped like crazy, and it's still a weird coincidence, especially given how good a job they did cleaning up the site and how quiet everything was around it. It really did look lost to time. TLDR. We ate at a weird restaurant with strange bandaged customers. My stepdad thought we'd gone to a vampire diner. We went back days later and found it had burned down 8 years before. I recently discovered this subreddit via subreddit of the day and was enthralled by all these stories. It reminded me of something that happened to me long ago, something that always stays slightly at the back of my mind. I never thought of it as a glitch in the Matrix, but this fits so well. The memories of it are still vivid to this day, even though I had also written it all down in my journal a couple weeks after I got home, that I've used as a refresher for writing this up. I was 16 and a typical teenage boy. It was the summer of 1993. My parents had sent me to Outward Bound, a month in the outdoors with other troubled teens pushing our limits, making us learn trust, etc. In reality, hiking 10 miles a day with 60 pounds on your back in the middle of nowhere with other misfits just trying to get through it and back to our lives. We were in the Three Sisters wilderness of the Oregon backcountry. Beautiful land. We were about 2 weeks into our month-long trip. I became close with a girl named Eva in my group, of about 10 girls and boys, and 3 guides, 1 guy, 2 women, who was from Sweden. I had been to Sweden a couple years earlier, and we were able to talk about places I visited that she knew. I'll never forget her. I was completely crushed on her. Beautiful blonde, with green eyes, tan for a Swede. The night before this incident, she and I kissed, and we made out a little out off by where we camped. We got caught by one of the guide's counselors and told that relationships, and especially sex, were not allowed. Something they drilled into us from day one. No drugs, no alcohol, no sex. We were just kissing somewhat innocently. I had also been friends with a guy named Steve. He has got blisters on his ankle the first week, and it got quite infected. The guides wanted him to drop out, go to a doctor, but he soldiered on. We kept it clean and bandaged, and even though he had a noticeable limp, he managed to keep up with all of us just fine. He talked the guides into thinking it was no big deal, and he stayed. He had amazing willpower, and I kind of looked up to him. He was almost always our group leader. Now came the weird part, the part where everything changed for me. We were taking a lunch break alongside a gorgeous crystal blue glacial fed pool. There was a minor waterfall, maybe 10 feet, from the stream above feeding it. The water was deep, but absolutely crystal clear and blue. And cold, very refreshing after a hot summer hike. You could see the soft gravel bottom. 5 large boulders stood in a perfect circle on the bottom, as if set there by someone. Completely submerged, they were perfectly equidistant from each other. Someone quickly noted that there was just enough room in the center to dive off the waterfall and swim down to the gravely beautiful bottom. A couple of the other kids, including Steve with his injured foot, went and dove. I, of course, wanted to impress Ava, and she said it looked fun but was too scared to it. She said she would try it if I did it. My teen ego immediately rose to the challenge. I climbed up the wet rocks next to the waterfall to the top. I remember looking down at the beautiful crystal blue water, the light filtering through the forest leaves, Eva looking and smiling up at me. It was just a perfect, beautiful day. I jumped. The next thing I know, I'm on the side of the pool, coughing up water with 2 extremely concerned guides nursing over me and a massive headache. They're telling me I hit my head on one of the boulders. I'm lucky I'm not dead. Steve is nowhere around. Eva doesn't look a mote concerned. She's off gossiping with one of the other girls. A couple of the other kids are with me, and the male guide helps me up. The waterfall is there, but the pool is now a murky green-brown. You can barely see the boulders on the bottom. I think I just must have stirred some dirt or something up the waterfall above the Fell Inn. I wasn't thinking clearly. I seem okay. The back of my head hurts, although my forehead is the part that has a minor cut. The third guide, leader, comes up at this point and makes me do some tests. What year is it? Who's the president? What's my name? Etc. It's 1993. Clinton is the new president. All is right with the world. We take an extra long lunch just to make sure I'm okay. The guides decide I probably just have a minor concussion. They should keep me up all night just to be safe. They decide we're going to hike to a closer, alternate camp, since I might be concussed. If things get worse, they call the Rangers. I didn't notice until later, but Steve was not with us. Eva seemed decidedly standoffish, but I didn't get much of a chance to talk to her. The guides wanted to keep me behind them, 1 in the back, 2 in the front. At camp that night, I notice Steve is missing. I freak out thinking we have left him and tell the guides. The guides quickly calm me down. They tell me Steve hasn't been with us for 4 days. When his foot got infected, they called the Rangers, and the Rangers took him to town. He could barely walk, and he's now out of the program and has been sent home. That made no sense to me. I could have sworn he was with us. I remember all 4 days of him hiking with us and his foot getting progressively better every day. I didn't say anything else. I didn't want them thinking I was crazy. I figured because of my head I misremembered, although it was all so clear. I remembered talking to him at lunch. That night it got weirder. The guides were going to take shifts staying up with me. I asked Eva if she would stay up with me a little bit. She looked at me like I was crazy. And her accent was different. She just laughed at me. The male guide noticed, and he said to me that I was one hell of a persistent guy. We talked. He said I'd been after Eva this whole time, and I really should give it up. He was nice about it, but it got through to me that I was being a creep. Or at least he thought so. I didn't understand. And he said, it wouldn't work anyway. When she gets back to Brazil, you'll never see her again anyway. Brazil, not Sweden. Brazil. Eva was from Brazil. This was not true. I thought I must have taken a bigger hit on the head than expected. I just stayed quiet from that moment on. I was so confused. I stayed up all night thinking of things, and in the morning I felt just fine. The rest of the trip was uneventful, but everything seemed suddenly slightly different for me from that day on. I've never understood exactly what happened. I suppose it's just the head injury. That makes sense, but some part of me just doesn't believe it. My world shifted that day. The memories before that moment are as clear and as easy to recall as what I had for breakfast this morning, or my wife's face. Even after I got back, my parents seemed different. They kept telling me what a changed and different person I was. Outward bound is supposed to change you, just not, I guess, like that. The whole world seemed different. Computers seemed better overnight. Like I didn't remember having such a cool computer, just a shitty one. Everything seemed different. Video games were more popular and better. The rest of high school I felt like an outsider. I had always fit in before, but as the years passed, I've grew used to it and grew back to my old, new self. Even though I have a rational explanation, my head injury, I have always doubted. I wonder if the Matrix reprogrammed itself, or I switched consciousness with an alternate me, or somehow, through some fluke of the universe, I slipped through into a universe almost, but not quite, the same as the one I came from. I'm late 30s now, happily married, and I still think about that day and that crystal blue pool.